Today we have Ravi Sreedharan. Welcome, Sreedharan.
Thank you, Mahala. Thank you.
Yeah. Those who have been watching this conversation, we have been speaking with CEOs, understanding about their work, their programs, and how does their journey help us. Today we have Ravi from ISDM. He is the founder and president. He started ISDM in 2016. Ravi has a long history. He has been graduated from IIT BHU and then did his master MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Worked in consumer banking for around 25 years. Has also been the CEO at Bank Economy. And that's where the things take little turn. He transitioned to social sector, joined Azim Premji Foundation for Education, Leadership and Management, and have been working there for 3.5 years. And that's where he started ISTM. So, Ravi, why don't you take us through how that transition happened from your corporate stint, then Azim Premji Foundation, and then ISDM? Because today in 2025, what ISDM is, there are a lot effort, there are a lot ideas that went into. So today's conversation, we wanted to know more about ISDM programs and the story of ISDM. So yeah, Ravi.
Sure, Mahala. Firstly, let me congratulate you, Mahala, on doing such an amazing job and helping people in the sector, especially youngsters, to know more about what's going on because they are the backbone of the sector at the end of the day. So, firstly, thank you for doing what you do, Mahala. Coming to my own journey, I started my career in the late 80s when India was still, at the early stages of its growth, or not even there, if you would imagine. And one needed to start working when your father was retiring. So that's how my career started, and that's how I ended up in the corporate world. And 1991 liberalization happened. So a lot of us who started careers at that time benefited from globalization and multinational companies and salaries going up and all that. So while a lot of us think we were very meritocratic, we were really riding a wave that was there after 1991. So I did very well in by the usual yardsticks of corporate world. I became a CEO of a bank by the time I was 45, 46. Uh, and by then, I had done some work 10 years before that to, set up a school for migrant workers, children outside Bangalore. And I just reflected, once, in fact, literally one evening, I was sitting alone and I closed my eyes and said, "What makes you happy, Ravi?" And I had so many successes, global life, this, that, and the other. Mala, nothing came to my mind other than that project that I did. And I said, if that's what makes you happy, then go do more of it. In fact, I tell a lot of youngsters, if you know what gives you happiness, that's the biggest gift you've got because then you know what you should go and do, right? So that's when I decided I wanted to come back and work in school education. And school education, because I felt school education is what gave me the opportunities that I was able to benefit from, and hence Azim Premji Foundation. Working in Azim Premji Foundation was humbling because you got to work, in villages in from Rajasthan to Uttarakhand to Madhya Pradesh to Chhattisgarh to, so many parts of the country. And time again, you would see amazing people. I mean, there was a head teacher in this blog called Baitu in Barmaid. And I was listening to her talk one day, and I said what she was doing was 100x the complexity of what I did as a CEO of a bank, with far more resources and all that sort of stuff. She was doing without resources and far more challenging situations, both professionally and personally. And that was always humbling, Mahala. But I used to also find that while there were amazing people doing great work, they were all struggling to build their organizations, struggling to survive, forget build their organizations. And you'll see this across the country, right? Every corner of the country, you'll see amazing individuals, amazing organizations, but struggling to build organizations. And then I used to think, this is so sad because this country needs these people's work to spread, to reach, in different parts of the country. And it was not happening. And sadly, it was not happening because of something that's far simpler than what they were anyway doing. Social change that they were working on is far more complex than managing and building organizations specifically, which is when, one got into this idea that if only one could fix that problem, which is the ability to build organizations, especially those who are working in social purpose, then it'll unleash a lot of benefit for huge sections of society, which today are getting denied that benefit. So that's how we started on this journey. And we said, if we had to build a school of management, which is for the social sector, because we also realized very quickly you can't run a school the way you run a bank. You have to reimagine management in the social sector. It's more collaborative, it's more participative, it's more inclusive, it's more values based. There's a lot of things that all of us in the sector know is very different from how a business is run or how the government is run. And when we went around the world, there wasn't really any dedicated focus for management of social purpose work. Whereas there was a lot of work on management of business, management of government, but this pillar was, weak. And because of that, if you see society, even in India since independence, the if you take the three legs of the stool, Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazar, which is state, markets, and civil society, the state and markets have become very strong. And the civil society has become very weak because of this problem of not having management talent. So that's how we started ISDM, Mahala. And when we started, we also said that we need to make the sector aspirational, stronger, because society, one could argue either equally benefits from all the three pillars. You could even argue that sometimes civil society has a bigger role to play because the government and the business will not do or cannot do many things which, benefit the weaker sections of the society. So then building that management became very, very important. And we also said this is not a specialization of an MBA program because this requires a DNA, this requires a mindset, this requires a definition of what a successful life is. And that's why we set up ISDM.
Great. I think one instance I wanted to also share, it was DODM 2023. So while we'll be discussing more about what ISDM offer and what is something that individuals how they can get in. But the sort of the DODM, the dialogue for development management, uh, that space also actually it's something that what we do today is because I still remember I was interacting with Atma and AT Chandra team, and then they were asking me that why don't you go out, start something of your own instead of just driving LinkedIn initiative, and then they're happy to support. So what actually helped us that gave us that courage, strength to go out, and then that there was a support also. Like if you need grants sort of, we're here to help you, and that's we never required because what we needed was the courage to start ground zero, and then that's how we started. So that actually I've been speaking about this with the ISDM team also some other day that
Yes.
it's not the program that you're running, but the ecosystem that you're helping. It's not something who's getting into, but even if they're coming, getting network access to a network, they're actually getting to do something. Oh, with this, Ravi, also wanted to understand most of the viewers that interact with the social sector podcast are someone who are already in the social sector, looking for transition, looking for upskilling, and youth who are actually thinking or confused, should they start getting into social sector? So if I, as an recent graduate, if look at ISDM as in my option, what is something that ISDM offer me?
Yeah. So let me give an analogy to what everybody knows, which is the business world. In business, you will have people who are the technical experts. So there are engineers, there are chartered accountants, there are company secretaries. Then there are the people who do the research work, right? Who study the science of organizations, etc. And those are the researchers, the research labs, the scientists, and all that, where inventions are created and all that. And then there is the managers who lead and manage organizations. So when the first MBAs came in the country in the 1960s, when IIM Ahmedabad and Calcutta was set up, people used to wonder, what does an MBA do? I know what the engineer does, I know what the chartered accountant does, I know what the scientist does, but I don't understand what this fellow does, right? But from there, if you look at it today the MBAs are the CEOs of the organizations. They are very highly paid because obviously they add a value. It's not because one is more important or the other is more important. That's an overall organization building role. And engineers can become, MBAs, chartered accountants can become MBAs. And so there is a lot of cross pollination. So if I now come to the social sector, we have social workers. So we have an MSW program. There are several colleges in the country that offer amazing social work program. Then the scientists are there, or people who understand the theory of development. So let's say an Azim-trained university where you study, masters in development, where you study anthropology, sociology, you'll understand the why, the philosophy of, what ought to be and things like that. But none of these programs prepare you for leading and managing organizations. They may to some extent, but it's not the core of these programs, right? And that's the space we're building. So imagine yourself as looking at doing an MBA, but for the social sector. I mean, MBA is the wrong phrase, but just to give the analogy. So you're studying an MBA degree, but for a career in the social sector. And and if you think about it, this MBA is not what you can study in an IIM or a MBA school, because this teaches you firstly about society and the complex nature of social change. It talks about designing interventions which bring systems thinking, design thinking, and all that. Then it talks about building organizations, so marketing, human resources, systems, data, MIS, etc. And fourth, which is very important and no MBA school teaches, is the importance of you as a person. Because in the social sector, your values and rooting your actions in your values, your biases of lived experiences, your blind spots, you'll never know. You're a privileged person that you're working in the social sector, what people are going through. How do you then take decisions in such an ecosystem? So building areas like deep listening, areas like building consensus, and so on and so forth. So it's these four pillars that we work on in a program like ours. So if when you graduate from here, you'll work alongside an MSW who's doing the social work, an MA Dev person who's talking about, why and what ought to be. But you're the one who brings expertise of, partly participating in designing interventions, but also in managing the organization, managing people, managing money, managing communication, managing data, governance, etc., etc. But with a solid, sort of foundation in social change. So it's imagine it very simply as this is like an IIM, but for the social sector.
Understood. So, I have a quick follow-up question is, say like one youth studied geography, bachelor's in geography. Now they can get into ISDM or they need to have, say, prior experience working in the ecosystem, social sector. How do you look at who should be fit in to get in?
Very, very good question. So to work in social sector, any undergrad is okay. Undergrad. So you could be a geography student, you can be an engineer, you can be a MBPS, you can be a journalist. The undergrad doesn't matter what your background is. So as long as the minimum requirement is you should be a graduate. So like an MBA program, the minimum requirement is you should be a graduate. Here also the minimum requirement is you have to be a graduate. You can be a graduate in bachelor's in social work. You could be a bachelor's of technology. You could be a bachelor in law. So undergrad degree is the minimum. We of course have several postgraduates also come after MA Dev or MSW or MTech and things like that. That's also common. But the minimum requirement is an undergrad degree. But what we look for, no, really, Mahala, is people who are passionate about the social sector. If you're looking for something to, build your resume for a foreign university, then that's not really what we are looking for. We are looking for people who want to go to work. I mean, the ideal person is you want to work after ISD. That's the ideal person. If you're really interested in higher studies
Mm,
immediately after ISDM, then this is not what I would recommend.
mm.
But if you want to come to ISDM and then go to work, then I would recommend ISDM. There are people who come to ISDM, work, and then want to study further because now they want to, sort of investigate a very specific area or something like that.
I think very relevant. I have a follow-up question, Ravi. One there we have been also talking about. There's a report by Dasra also, and we're also solving the same problem, talent management problem. So, how do you look at the future of work in the non-profits? Because what you're solving is the larger problem through
Yes.
the PZDM in at ISDM. So, wanted to understand your insights around that as well, future of work,
Yeah.
how to look at it.
So this might be the most relevant part for your, sort of audience who are amazing youngsters. Uh, this sector is at the beginning of a huge growth. The reason is that the country today is going to be growing at about 6, 7, maybe 8% economically. The GDP will grow for the next 25 years. And that's just the trajectory of the nation, right? And if it does grow like that, this country will, I mean, last week we crossed Japan and became the fourth largest economy. I in 2047, when India turns 100, and most of the youngsters who listen to your podcast would be in the middle of their career, maybe 15, 20 years into their career, we will be a $25 trillion economy. And that's relevant because when you become a $25 trillion economy, and if you spend the same 8% that India spends today on development, that money is $2 trillion. That was the size of our country less than 10 years ago. So you have an opportunity to make a huge difference to our countries, the less privileged sections, because there is so much, of money that's going to come into development work, into philanthropy, right? There's government and there's private philanthropy. So this window of 25 years is the biggest opportunity India has had in the last 2 centuries, if not 3 centuries, to make a difference to 800 million people. And thereby, this sector is going to be on a huge boom, if you ask me, in the next 25, 30 years. The most important thing is, and that's a plug really for why ISDM, is because you need to manage that money very well. If you don't manage that growth and that economic wealth properly, this country will become the most unequal country in the world. And we all know, those of us who work in social work, that inequality is the cause of all social evils. So this is a huge window of opportunity to build a career in the social sector because you can make a huge difference. So that's one from an overall direction perspective. The second is, conventionally, and this goes back to the freedom movement and when the social sector was very, very powerful, we've conventionally been very good at leadership and not so good at management. And to the world of people in the corporate, I say the opposite. You're very good at management, but you're useless at leadership. You know what I mean? So I say that businesses are, well managed but poorly led, and social sector is very well led and poorly managed. And I think that shift is going to happen in the social sector, which is bringing the leadership along with the ability to manage things. I mean, think of it, Mala. Today, our country, there are only 19 organizations, as per a report, which have an operating budget of more than 100 crores, which is really nothing in a country like ours, right? And I'm talking about $2 trillion. I mean, that's I can't even imagine how many zeros are there in that. We need talent who can manage, those sort of scale and that sort of money. So I think we will see a huge growth in the sector. I think we'll see a shift from leadership to management. I don't mean leadership will go away. Leadership is very critical. Um, and yeah, those are two really big things that I'm seeing in the sector over the next 20, 25 years.
Right. And how do you look at someone who is into the ecosystem already worked for 5 year, 2 year, 3 year, 10 year? Do you think the program still stays relevant to someone who want to upskill, want to learn something new? Wanted to get
Yeah.
your insights on that?
I would break it into if you're below 30 or above 30, roughly. It's an approximation I'm giving. If you're 30 or below, I would recommend the PGP program
Mm-hmm.
because our students range from 22 to 30. So
Mm-hmm.
that age bracket, I still think, because you still have another 30 years of career ahead of you, so you might as well prepare yourself. So I would recommend you to do the PGP DM program. But if you're above 30, say you're 35 or something like that, then you're better off doing short courses.
Mm-hmm.
Then taking a year off and all that is not a good idea. Then I would recommend short courses.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that ISDM is hoping to introduce, if not next year, the year after next,
Mm-hmm.
is a what we are calling an executive education and masters in development management, which means you continue doing your job and then you come for maybe 1 week, 3 times over the course of the year, but then the classes are online. There's a lot of self-study material and all that. Like IIMs have, they have something called PGPX, so something like that we are hoping to introduce. But meanwhile, one of the things I would recommend people to look out for is we are planning to create a whole huge e-school for ISDM. The
Mm-hmm.
e-school basically will give a lot of learning opportunities, hopefully even in languages, in Hindi, in Chhattisgarhi, in Tamil, and whatever, for people working even in languages and in the hinterlands to be able to learn management. So if you are below 30, PGP program. If you're above 30, look for short programs that ISDM keeps announcing every now and then. And sooner, please, you'll see some lot of opportunities coming on the online, mobile phones and internet and all that.
Right. Also, wanted to understand, do you also offer scholarships if someone want to get into and maybe the
Yeah.
cost is an issue.
No, absolutely. There are two things we do, Mahala. The average cost of running a high quality program is almost twice the fees we charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we get funding and all that. And even in the fees, we only charge as much as a student is able to pay. We
Mm-hmm.
have this philosophy that if a student gets admission, then finances should not be a reason for them not to be able to study at ISD. So we find answers. So one of them is scholarship, which is a very popular option. The second is there are people who actually come from well-off families and say, but I don't want to take money from my parents. In which case we tell them, that's fine. We'll offer you a pay forward option, which means you don't pay now. But
Mm-hmm.
once you start working over a 2 year, 3 year period, either 4,000 something rupees per month or 8,000 rupees per month, depending on your salary, you can repay it, which means you pay forward. Basically, you're paying the fees of a future student. So we have deferred payment also as an option. Uh, for some students, we even give living grants because they come, they say, I can't pay your fees, but I also need money to live in, this 1 year because I don't have money for that also. So sometimes we also give living grants also. The new thing that we've introduced is that we've started offering merit scholarships, Mahala. And that's because we want more and more of the bright students to also come into the social sector.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've started a merit scholarship, which means even if you're better off in terms of income, but you're very interested in the sector, we will waive the fees or we'll give you a scholarship for that also.
Right, very interesting model. I heard about the second model for the first time and offering pay forward. Uh, I had another interesting question. I met a couple of ISDM fellows. Anubhav Hand is one of them. I was interacting him during one of the alumni meet, and then maybe very very interesting work that they're doing. So overall, what are the career pathways for
Hmm.
someone who did the PGDM at ISDM and then maybe they
Yeah.
going to the sector. So what sort of career?
So So we've now graduated 7 batches of students, the 8 batches currently on. So there's a sort of a steady state. Now we know what are the kind of jobs that people go for. So first, let me start by saying organizations, right? So they go from organizations from grassroots organizations. So Pradhan, Gram Vikas, Ajivika, Swami Vivekananda, whatever, a lot of the grassroots organizations they work with. And they also work in grant making organization, Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives, or Ford Foundation, or several of the CSRs that are operating in the country, like Edelgive Foundation and places like that. So both extreme. Then, of course, in between, they are in consulting companies, they are in think tanks, they are in monitoring and evaluation organizations. So full range of organizations that the students work in. And of course, they work in all sorts of areas from education and public health and livelihood, which tend to be the major ones. But they also work in culture, they work in sports, they work in, uh, cancer survivors. Sorry, that's in health again. But a full range of areas that they would work in. That's the second axis. So one is in terms of the types of organization. The second is in the types of sectors. And then the functions that they do, a lot of them go into program management. That's the most common thing that one hears our students going and doing. Program management, obviously, you look after a state, or you look after a district, or you look after a PMU. They also work in government ministries, so several of our students have gone and managed certain programs looking after a state or two states and things like that. Functional skills that they go to do, one is program management. Then there are several students who go into fundraising. Then there are students who go into communications, so behavior change communications, internal communications, and all that. Then there are students who all have also gone, but less into places like talent management.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Definitely, students have gone into things like monitoring and evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then there is another 10% of our students who started their own organizations. Some trying to work with some handloom weaver clusters, some trying to improve the lives of old people, somebody who's trying to help girls who reach college to bridge from there, otherwise they just get married and go away. So yeah, so social enterprises is another area that our students have been going to work. So yeah, from consulting to grant making to intermediary organizations to grassroots. The good news is that all 8 batches except the COVID batch, because COVID was a bad year for everyone. We've had 100% placement of our students, Mahala, which means there is a demand for these students, and that's been very good. And by and large, the salaries have been very, very reasonable. I mean, just to give you a sense, we find that our freshers who join are able to go out at about 5 to 6 lakh salaries.
Mhm.
And then with WorkX, it can go up to 10 lakhs and 12 lakhs and all that, which is actually huge because we do this interesting calculation of what was your salary before you joined ISDN
Mhm.
and when you left ISDN. And mind you, some of these are students who are coming from corporate jobs, right? So Accenture, TCS, places like that. And that increase over the 7 years average has been 65%.
Mhm.
Last year was even higher, it was at 90%. So I feel there is a demand for, our students. It's still early days, but today our early batch students have reached, the middle management, upper middle management levels and all that. So I think, what we started is something that is genuinely of value to the sector and thereby the sector. And you mentioned, for example, Anubhav from Lend a Hand India.
Mhm.
Anubhav was in our first batch. So
Mhm.
Lend a Hand hired our students from the first batch. They continue to hire even till today in our eighth batch also. So yeah, so people are coming back also. That
Had
also means it's a
privilege working with few others. One of them had very interesting research, Bharat Career Aspiration Report with UNICEF and UA was working with
right.
acting career. So very fantastic. And Ravi, you have been into the ecosystem, first 25 year in corporate and then last 15 year in the non-profit ecosystem. You have been interacting with so many grant making org, non-profits, people, youth and the government, all three section, Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar. Now, if I ask you one advice for someone who's youth, want to get into social sector, what is one advice that you would like to give?
Yeah, it's this simple concept of ikigai.
Mhm.
You should choose a space which you're passionate about,
Mhm.
two, you're good at, third, is relevant for society, and fourth, the society is willing to pay for it. If these four are matched, you will have very happy lives. And I find that, especially for the passion bit, the social sector becomes very relevant. But then choose passion along with what you're good at, right? So choose areas which are you good in communication? Are you good in people? Are you good in communities? And of course, choose careers where it is a paying option, right? Because and the good thing about the social sector is, unlike 20 years ago, today it's no longer thought of as a volunteering space or, a weekend job or anything like that. It's a proper career, right? And today, most of I mean, I just gave you some of the data points from our own placement. But if you look at the sector, that salary growth is much higher than the corporate is growing. It's still way below, but the growth is much faster. So I think if you're able to choose careers that meet those four, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? What does society need and what is society willing to pay for? I think you'll live very happy lives.
Great. And I think I can I understand that from that money from banking ecosystem to the non-profit ecosystem and then mixing that very good insight learning. Ravi will be catching up sometime soon for the another round of conversation. We'll have detailed conversation. But thank you for joining us today for Know the Social Sector series
Um,
of conversation. Thank you, and we'll be reaching out to you again soon for another conversation.